In this video, we will explore the problem of self-knowledge in Nietzsche's philosophy, and the method Nietzsche proposed as an alternative to self-observation. Nietzsche's skepticism towards self-knowledge seems to contradict his urge that we get to know ourselves better. As we attempt to resolve this paradox in Nietzsche's thinking, we are confronted with another provocative proposition. The more familiar we become with ourselves, the harder it becomes to perceive ourselves in a new light. Nietzsche's dismantling of conventional notions of the self challenges us to go beyond the surface and venture into the uncharted territories of self-exploration. Nietzsche was profoundly skeptical of the tendency of previous philosophers to use self-observation to acquire knowledge of the self. In his view, our attempts to truly know ourselves have been superficial and inadequate. The main reasons for this lack of self-knowledge are twofold: a lack of seriousness in our approach, and a limited amount of time spent reflecting on our own experiences. It's not just that previous theorists' attempts at self-knowledge have been superficial and inadequate. They have actually distorted and further concealed the truth about ourselves. I fear we have never really been with it in such matters. Our heart is simply not in it, and not even our ear. Nietzsche attempted to define the boundaries of self-consciousness. Firstly, there is the phenomenalism of the inner world, where the true nature of things are obscured, presenting them differently than they actually are. Secondly, there is the enigmatic realm of instincts, drives, and effects that form the unconscious mind, an unfamiliar domain that influences our thoughts and actions. Lastly, Nietzsche contemplates the non-individual nature of language and consciousness, emphasizing how they both transcend individual identity and possess a collective character. To comprehend Nietzsche's belief that self-observation alone is insufficient for acquiring self-knowledge, we must delve into his analysis of consciousness and language. According to Nietzsche, consciousness emerged as a response to the necessity of communication within human tribes. He viewed consciousness as a byproduct of our innate herd-like nature, enabling us to connect with others and function as a social species. However, since consciousness originated from the imperative of communication, its symbols primarily revolve around shared experiences and commonalities. As a result, language and consciousness fail to adequately capture or convey the most unique and individual aspects of our existence. Consequently, given the best will in the world to understand ourselves as individually as possible, to know ourselves, each of us will always succeed in becoming conscious only of what is not individual, but average. Our thoughts themselves are continually governed by the character of consciousness, by the genius of the species that commands it, and translated back into the perspective of the herd. Fundamentally, all our actions are altogether incomparably personal, unique, and infinitely individual. There is no doubt of that. But as soon as we translate them into consciousness, they no longer seem to be. Nietzsche characterizes conscious thoughts as signs or symbols of the herd. He suggests that consciousness and language have evolved together, thus contributing to their shared limitation. Any aspect of our individuality, when articulated, becomes subject to the perspective of the collective because conscious thoughts rely on common symbols. Since our comprehension and descriptions of both the external and internal realms occur through the medium of language, our understanding remains superficial. This is precisely what Nietzsche implies by the term phenomenalism. This is the essence of phenomenalism and perspectivism as I understand them. Owing to the nature of animal consciousness, the world of which we can become conscious is only a surface and sign world. Whatever becomes conscious becomes by the same token shallow, thin, relatively stupid general sign, herd signal. All becoming conscious involves a great and thorough corruption, falsification, reduction to superficialities, and generalization. Many philosophers in the past have regarded introspection as a means to gain privileged access to the inner world of the self. According to Nietzsche, this approach is inadequate because the inner world is not more immediately known to us than the outer world. The aspects of our experience we are most familiar with, particularly the inner world of the soul, pose a greater challenge for us to perceive anew. Nietzsche is suggesting that our familiarity with the inner world of the psyche contributes to its enigmatic nature. The very familiarity we have with the inner world of consciousness can, in fact, obscure our understanding of the self. Over time, we cease to approach it with fresh perspectives because the familiarity breeds preconceptions that envelop it. Consequently, these preconceptions create a formidable barrier when attempting to challenge and question them. The more familiar something is to us, the more difficult it becomes to see it with fresh eyes, and gaining a deeper comprehension of our true selves becomes most difficult of all, because it is the most familiar to us. The familiar is what we are used to, and what we are used to is the most difficult to know. That is, to view as a problem, to see as strange, as distant, as outside us. While Hegel believed that the task of philosophy is to attain comprehension, Nietzsche argues that such comprehension involves self-deception. Nietzsche proposed that the purpose of seeking knowledge is to transform the unfamiliar into the familiar. If this were true, then it becomes evident that mere knowledge does not necessarily equate to genuine understanding. In fact, our knowledge often involves a process of falsification. It is due to this sense of familiarity that we typically commence our quest for self-understanding from the realm of the inner world, relying on introspection, which apparently reveals to us the facts of consciousness. However, Nietzsche considers this approach to be the gravest of errors, as what is immediately familiar to us is not necessarily better understood. What is it that the common people take for knowledge? What do they want when they want knowledge? Nothing more than this. Something strange is to be reduced to something familiar. Nietzsche's critique of self-knowledge and his simultaneous urge that we know ourselves appear to create a paradox within his thinking. Furthermore, it is precisely his understanding of the self that leads him to believe that genuine self-knowledge is unattainable. There is, however, a resolution to this paradox, which we will explore and attempt to unravel next. Despite Nietzsche's criticism of self-knowledge, he did not outrightly dismiss it. Instead, he acknowledged that there are better avenues through which we can acquire knowledge about ourselves. However, before delving into the methods of gaining self-knowledge, it is crucial to grasp Nietzsche's nuanced understanding of the term itself. He employs the term self-knowledge in two distinct ways, highlighting a differentiation between the notion of the self and the diverse forms of knowledge pertaining to the self. By recognizing this distinction, we can lay the foundation for comprehending how Nietzsche approaches the concept of self-knowledge. The initial distinction to be made involves what we are referring to when we use the term self-knowledge. One aspect of self-knowledge pertains to the inner world, encompassing thoughts, motives, and emotions. Nietzsche holds the belief that gaining knowledge about the inner world's true nature is a near hopeless endeavor, as consciousness alone cannot penetrate the profound depths of the soul. He metaphorically describes consciousness as a surface skin that unveils certain aspects but conceals much more. Consequently, the genuine essence of the inner world remains elusive and unknowable. However, there are interconnected processes within the psyche that operate beneath the level of consciousness, such as thinking, feeling, and willing. Claiming to comprehend the processes underlying thoughts and feelings differs from claiming to truly understand their intrinsic nature. It is this kind of self-knowledge that we can aspire to know. By distinguishing between the inaccessible nature of the inner world's essence and the attainable understanding of its underlying processes, we can navigate the realm of self-knowledge according to Nietzsche's framework. As an illustration, consider a description from one of Nietzsche's notes, which explores how our drives give rise to thoughts and emotions. Every thought, every feeling, every will is not born of one particular drive, but is a total state, a whole surface of the whole consciousness, and results from how the power of all drives that constitute us is fixed at that moment. Thus, the power of the drive that dominates just now, as well as of the drives obeying or resisting. The next thought is a sign of how the total power situation has now shifted. Nietzsche defines the attempt to gain knowledge of these interconnected processes as genuine self-knowledge. As previously mentioned, Nietzsche rejects the notion that we can achieve genuine self-understanding through direct self-observation. What becomes conscious to us is, in fact, the smallest, most limited, superficial, and least individual aspect of our thinking. Nietzsche conceptualized conscious thoughts as the last link in a chain, representing the culmination of numerous unconscious processes that have finally emerged into consciousness. Thoughts and feelings are a product of the internal conflicts and movements of our drives, and what enters consciousness is merely the end result of this intricate interplay. Our understanding of the relationship between thoughts remains limited, as we lack knowledge regarding whether the connection between thoughts is causal or associative. In another note, Nietzsche provides another example of what he thinks is genuine self-knowledge. Everything which enters consciousness is the last link in a chain, closure. It is just an illusion that one thought is the immediate cause of another thought. The events which are actually connected are played out below our consciousness. The series and sequences of feelings, thoughts, etc., that appear are symptoms of what actually happens. When we attempt to observe our own thoughts, we are confronted with a series of thoughts, emotions, and ideas. It has been ingrained in us to assume that there exists a causal relationship between these elements. This assumption forms the basis of our understanding of concepts such as mind, free will, reason, and logic. However, conscious thinking represents only the final stage of thought, merely scratching the surface of a much deeper structure. We lack immediate knowledge or direct access to the vast multitude of thoughts and emotions that constitute the core of our unconscious thinking. Consequently, all endeavors to truly comprehend the essence of this inner world will inevitably remain superficial and incomplete. Nietzsche asserts that our chances of acquiring some understanding lie more in exploring the underlying processes themselves, rather than attempting to unravel the entirety of this enigmatic realm. By focusing on gaining insights into the processes at play in the psyche, we may have a better opportunity to glean meaningful knowledge about our inner world. The insufficiency of direct self-observation stems, in part, from the realization that the inner self is not a static, unchanging metaphysical entity that can be observed as one would examine a common object. Instead, the self is a complex composition comprising our instincts, drives, and affects, a subject multiplicity, as Nietzsche terms it. To comprehend the inner workings of the self, an indirect approach becomes necessary, as the conventional methods of direct observation are ill-suited for such a dynamic and multifaceted structure. By adopting an alternative approach, we can hope to uncover valuable insights into the intricate inner workings of our multifarious self. In the next section of this video, we will explore the methodology employed by Nietzsche for attaining self-knowledge. As I previously stated, Nietzsche dismisses the notion that we can achieve genuine self-understanding through direct self-observation. Instead, he proposes an alternative approach that he believes to be more accurate. However, intriguingly, Nietzsche's own method of self-exploration leads him to the conclusion that true knowledge of the self is unattainable. This paradox arises from the fact that through this more accurate understanding of the self, Nietzsche recognizes the inescapable presence of the phenomenalism of the inner world. Consequently, he views the desire for this kind of self-knowledge as an illusion or fantasy. The resolution to this paradox emerges through the distinction we established earlier, thanks to the work of scholar Paolo Stellino, between the two forms of self-knowledge. The first type pertains to understanding the true essence of the world of instincts, drives, and emotions. The second type involves making inferences about the unconscious processes underlying thinking, feeling, and willing. Nietzsche's exploration and understanding of the inner workings of the self lead him to adopt a skeptical stance regarding the possibility of attaining true knowledge of the nature of thoughts, feelings, drives, and so on. Instead, he provides an alternative form of self-knowledge, which revolves around comprehending the intricate processes within the psyche itself. By recognizing this distinction between the two types of self-knowledge, Paolo Stellino reconciles the apparent contradiction in Nietzsche's thinking. Nietzsche's rejection of one form of self-knowledge is consistent with his assertion of a more comprehensive and accurate understanding of the workings of the inner world as a more genuine form of self-knowledge. Having resolved this apparent paradox, we can now delve into Nietzsche's method for acquiring a more genuine form of self-knowledge. Recognizing the limitations of direct self-observation, Nietzsche advocates for an indirect approach to understanding ourselves. One such method is the study of history. By delving into the realms of history, we can gain valuable insights into the collective experiences, struggles, and transformations of humanity. Through an examination of historical events, cultural developments, and the evolution of ideas, we can uncover patterns, influences, and dynamics that shape the human psyche and our individual selves. This historical perspective provides us with a broader context within which to situate and comprehend our own existence. By incorporating the study of history as an indirect approach to self-knowledge, Nietzsche offers a pathway to gaining a deeper and more authentic understanding of ourselves. It enables us to transcend the limitations of direct self-observation and embrace a broader perspective that encompasses the rich tapestry of human experiences throughout time. Direct self-observation is not nearly sufficient for us to know ourselves. We require history, for the past continues to flow within us in 100 different waves. We ourselves are, indeed, nothing but that which at every moment we experience of this continued flowing. Nietzsche dismissed the direct approach to acquiring self-knowledge as insufficient, recognizing that the self is not a fixed entity, but rather a dynamic and ever-changing amalgamation of flowing forces. Instead of perceiving the self as a stable and unchanging entity, Nietzsche viewed it as a fluid and transformative existence. According to this perspective, the self is akin to a sea of ever-shifting forces, where various impulses, instincts, and drives converge and intermingle, making the statement of the pre-Socratic philosopher Heraclitus relevant in the context of self-knowledge. When we desire to descend into the river of what seems to be our own most intimate and personal being, there applies the dictum of Heraclitus: we cannot step into the same river twice. Nietzsche's approach of utilizing history as a means to attain self-knowledge was significantly influenced by the ideas of the American philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson. Emerson suggested that by engaging with historical narratives, we can glean insights into our own selves, because these accounts offer valuable knowledge about the human condition. Emerson's proposition resonated with Nietzsche, prompting him to embrace history as a powerful tool for self-discovery. Nietzsche recognized that the events and experiences chronicled in history provide us with a window into the intricacies of human existence. By immersing ourselves in the stories of the past, we can uncover universal truths, patterns of behavior, and the fundamental aspects of the human condition that transcend time and culture. This methodology underscores the significance of history as a rich source of self-reflection and personal growth. There is one mind common to all individual men. Every man is an inlet to the same and to all of the same. If anyone will but take pains to observe the variety of actions to which he is equally inclined in certain moods of mind, and those to which he is averse, he will see how deep is the chain of affinity. Both Nietzsche and Emerson assert that our individual identities are shaped by the cumulative moral and spiritual development that has unfolded over centuries. Nietzsche did not entirely dismiss the possibility of gaining insights into the inner nature of the self. However, he argues that direct self-observation alone fails to provide genuine self-knowledge. Instead, Nietzsche suggests that we can attain such knowledge through an indirect approach, namely by engaging with history as if it were a biography. The world exists for the education of each man. There is no age or state of society or mode of action in history to which there is not somewhat corresponding in his life. According to Nietzsche scholar Robert Pippin, this kind of knowledge is not derived from mere observation, but rather from interpretation. When we read history and interpret it through our own unique lens, we uncover aspects of ourselves. Our personal interpretation and identification with specific moments in history serve as a revealing reflection of our own identities. Depending on our current mood or disposition, we may sympathize with different events in history, shedding light on our own individuality and providing us with self-revelation. By recognizing the interpretative nature of our engagement with history, Nietzsche highlights the dynamic relationship between our subjective perspectives and the unfolding narratives of human civilization. Through this lens, history becomes a profound tool for self-reflection and self-discovery, allowing us to uncover deeper layers of our own being by exploring the resonances and connections we establish with the events and individuals of the past. In other words, according to our present interest, we instinctively select some facts from the flow of history which our souls resound with particular intensity. Then we relive these moments internally, drawing from them the same sensations that we would have had through a first-hand experience. If we allow history to flow through us, we can experience the process of becoming and transformation in Egypt and Greece, Byzantium and Rome, France and Germany. As Nietzsche says in Human All Too Human, thus self-knowledge will become universal knowledge with regard to all that is past. Nietzsche posits three distinct factors that contribute to his conviction that his method surpasses the traditional practice of direct self-observation employed by philosophers who preceded him. His indirect approach relies on three complementary disciplines: psychology, physiology, and genealogy, which focuses on the historical development of ideas. In Nietzsche's framework, physiology assumes a crucial role as it utilizes the body as a guiding principle for comprehending the inner world. Recognizing the inherent vagueness and illusory nature of the self-perception derived from direct self-observation, Nietzsche asserts that the indirect study of the body offers more profound insights and meaningful answers. If you're interested, I have created a video discussing Nietzsche's exploration of the body, which you can check out for further elaboration on the topic. Nietzsche's incorporation of the body within the realm of self-knowledge serves a distinct purpose, one that is opposed to metaphysical and substantialist perspectives. Unlike past philosophers who adhered to the dichotomy of body and soul, Nietzsche envisions the individual as a composition of instincts and drives. By recognizing the inseparable link between the mental and the physical aspects of human existence in this manner, psychology and physiology transcend their conventional boundaries and merge into a psychophysiology. Consequently, any accurate understanding of psychological processes necessitates acknowledging the physiological foundation of the psyche, namely, the physical body. By eroding this dualistic view and emphasizing the interplay between the psychological and the physiological, Nietzsche's approach to self-knowledge challenges long-standing philosophical assumptions. Within the framework of indirect paths toward self-knowledge, history and genealogy assume a significant role. Particularly, genealogy holds great importance when unraveling the intricate inner workings of the psyche. It is through the lens of genealogy that Nietzsche investigates notions such as free will and the origins of morality. Later in the video, we will explore Nietzsche's practical application of his method as he investigates the origins of moral judgments. Nietzsche's method, encompassing physiology, psychology, and genealogy, carries another vital aspect. There are practical implications derived from this approach to self-knowledge. Nietzsche reveals that our comprehension of ourselves profoundly shapes our subjective experiences in terms of judgments, emotions, and agency. If we were to possess an alternative conceptual framework, our perception and experience of thoughts, feelings, and actions would be fundamentally different. The conceptual schema we employ acts as a structural lens through which we perceive and interpret the world. Consequently, this insight yields practical consequences. By modifying our conceptual schema, such as that of agency, we can produce transformative actions that actively shape our own existence. For example, if we were to perceive our moral judgments as unconventional, our moral outlook would diverge from the conventional norms. Presently, our understanding of agency often constrains us, leading us to believe that certain aspects, like moral judgments, are unchangeable. In the words of Nietzsche scholar Paolo Stellino, an alternative understanding of agency would compel me to transcend the deeply ingrained Christian morality and empower myself to establish my own unique set of values. Thus, self-knowledge serves as a catalyst for self-creation, enabling individuals to forge their own paths and shape their distinctive values. In section 32 of Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche presents a moral history of humanity that unfolds in three distinct phases: the pre-moral, moral, and extra-moral periods. Each of these phases corresponds to different stages in the development of human knowledge. In the earliest and lengthiest period of human history, the value of an action was determined solely by its consequences, while its origin or motive was disregarded. It is within this phase that the imperative "know thyself" remained unfamiliar. Subsequently, the moral period emerged, spanning the past 10,000 years according to Nietzsche, during which the value of an action shifted to its origin rather than its consequences. This refinement of outcome and criterion facilitated a reversal of perspective. According to Nietzsche, this marks the first attempt at self-knowledge. However, this first endeavor of self-knowledge is plagued by what Nietzsche refers to as a disastrous new superstition, wherein the interpretation of actions focuses solely on their intention. It is from this error in popular psychology that our conception of agency or free will arises. The fallacy of this prevailing psychology gave rise to the morality of intentions, which paved the way for morally charged concepts, such as responsibility and guilt. At the core of this new perspective lies the premise that the origin of every action resides within consciousness. Thus, as Nietzsche puts it in Twilight of the Idols, the most fundamental piece of counterfeiting in psychologicis became the principle of psychology itself. This sheds light on Nietzsche's belief that psychology remains entangled in moral biases. According to him, the source of an action does not reside within consciousness, but rather in the unconscious realm of our instincts and drives. Morality is an act of deception that humanity has not only imposed upon itself, but also upon the world. According to Nietzsche, the shift towards the third stage, the extramoral, will be prompted by a renewed self-reflection and a profound exploration of humanity, a threshold we are currently standing upon. This transition will arise from a growing skepticism towards popular psychology and a newfound consciousness. In this forthcoming era, the worth of an action will be determined by its unintentional aspects. Such a paradigm will emerge once a hierarchy of significance is established, a differentiation of value among individuals. The decisive value of an action lies precisely in what is unintentional in it, while everything about it that is intentional, everything about it that can be seen, known, conscious, still belongs to its surface and skin, which, like every skin, betrays something but conceals even more. The precise meaning of Nietzsche's statement regarding the value of an action being determined by what is unintentional in it is not explained explicitly. From my understanding, it suggests that the worth of an action does not lie solely in the professed motives behind it, but rather in the dominant instincts and drives of the individual that produced it. The value of an individual is to be determined by their physiological constitution, which will be evident in their modes of thinking, feeling, and evaluating. Nietzsche was interested in creating an order of rank, so perhaps this is what he meant by the value is determined by what is unintentional in an action. Nietzsche's notes contain a section where he posits that actions themselves are not inherently good or bad. Instead, their value depends on the individual performing them. A single act can be seen as a great privilege in one instance, and a mark of disgrace in another, depending on who is performing it. In any case, once this new perspective is embraced, and the underlying assumptions of morality are recognized as fallacious, the latter will be discarded as mere prejudice, holding no more value than astronomy or alchemy. In section 335 of The Gay Science, Nietzsche presents an analysis of moral judgments that illustrates his method. Initially, Nietzsche discusses the bias inherent in moral judgments, where an individual assumes that something is right, and subsequently deduces that it ought to be done, resulting in the actual performance of the action. In The Gay Science, section 335, Nietzsche outlines the conventional rationale behind moral conduct. When a human being judges this is right, and then infers therefore it must be done, and then proceeds to do what he has thus recognized as right and designated as necessary, then the essence of his action is moral. This prevailing explanation for a moral act, however, is flawed as it fails to recognize the distinctiveness of the entire process. In reality, three distinct actions are taking place. Even the judgment that something is right constitutes an action in itself. Behind this judgment, there exist numerous preconceptions and assumptions regarding the belief that such and such is right. When you judge this is right, that is an action too. Might it not be possible that one could judge in a moral and in an immoral manner? Why do you consider this precisely this, right? The shallow interpretation of the moral act offered by popular psychology reveals the inadequacy of self-observation. We tend to offer a superficial explanation for the emergence of moral judgments and easily settle for it, without ever questioning its limitations. In fact, we willingly evade any further inquiry. This pattern is equally applicable to judgments of conscience, which people unquestioningly accept as inherently righteous and truthful, without engaging in any further investigation. Why do you listen to the voice of your conscience? And what gives you the right to consider such a judgment true and infallible? For this faith, is there no conscience for that? Have you not heard of an intellectual conscience? A conscience behind your conscience? How did it originate there? You must ask, and then also, what is it that impels me to listen to it? The conscience, although commonly regarded as an authoritative source for moral judgments, is not a reliable guide for determining right and wrong. Nietzsche emphasizes that the conscience reproaches certain actions merely because they have been reproached for a long time, without necessarily considering their intrinsic value or validity. The conscience does not possess the ability to independently create or establish moral values. Therefore, it is not a dependable or infallible guide for guiding moral actions. There are 100 ways in which you can listen to your conscience, but that you take this or that judgment for the voice of conscience, in other words, that you feel something to be right, may be due to the fact that you have never thought much about yourself, and simply have accepted blindly that what you have been told ever since your childhood was right. In The Dawn, Nietzsche posits that moral feelings become ingrained within us during childhood, as we observe adults expressing preferences or aversions towards specific actions. As primates, we naturally imitate and internalize these judgments. Nietzsche views moral judgments as manifestations of underlying inner feelings or dispositions, otherwise called affects. These effects, which arise from our drives, generate inclinations or aversions within us. Our moral judgments, therefore, originate from the cultural evaluation of these fundamental feelings engendered by our drives. Take, for instance, cowardice, which arises as an effective response in the face of danger, serving as a self-preservative mechanism to avoid conflict with a stronger adversary. This fundamental effective response, originating from a drive, is inherently neutral, devoid of moral significance. It is through the lens of culture that this response acquires moral connotations. In the context of Homeric Greece, displaying fear and submission before one's enemies is perceived as a sign of weakness and is deemed shameful. However, within the framework of Christianity, this cowardly behavior is redefined as a virtue and labeled as meekness. Culture imprints its seal of approval or disapproval upon this fundamental effective response, consequently shaping its experience as either shameful or virtuous. This is how Nietzsche upholds the notion that moralities are manifestations of our affects, intricately intertwined with the cultural environment. The evaluation imposed by culture, which can be seen as a meta-feeling, imparts moral significance to these foundational affects. By employing his methodology of physiology, psychology, and genealogy, Nietzsche believes he has unraveled the roots of moral judgments, which he encapsulates in a formula. Your judgment, this is right, has a prehistory in your instincts, likes, dislikes, experiences, and lack of experiences. Notice the stark contrast between this form of self-knowledge and the one derived solely through introspection. It is through indirect means that we attain this type of knowledge, which Nietzsche deems to offer more authentic insights. Such self-knowledge, according to Nietzsche, is not only attainable, but also an essential prerequisite for self-creation. By refining our understanding of ourselves, we can transform our responses to these basic inclinations and aversions stemming from our drives. Consequently, transcending morality and challenging its foundations would no longer produce feelings of guilt. Nietzsche contends that altering our beliefs concerning these fundamental affects would also alter our experiential relationship with them, much like how shifting our conceptual framework reshapes our perception of the world. The surpassing of morality entails a process of self-overcoming, wherein we modify our patterns of thinking, feeling, and evaluating based on our newfound self-knowledge. This realization has another important practical consequence. Our understanding of how moral judgments come into being is supposed to have the effect of freeing us from their grip. If you have thought more subtly, observed better, and learned more, you certainly would not go on calling this duty of yours and this conscience of yours duty and conscience. Your understanding of the manner in which moral judgments have originated would spoil these grand words for you, just as other grand words like sin and salvation of the soul and redemption have been spoiled for you. Nietzsche emphasizes the importance of acquiring a more comprehensive understanding of ourselves and the nature of moral judgments. This necessitates a multifaceted approach that combines physiological insights, taking into account the influence of the body, psychological considerations that delve into our inclinations and aversions, and genealogical perspectives that explore the historical context of our experiences. By integrating these dimensions, Nietzsche seeks to foster a richer and more nuanced self-knowledge. Nietzsche's penetrating insights into the formulation of moral judgments derived from a new meticulous methodology disrupt the sentimental grip that moral concepts hold over us, ultimately leading to a profound purification of our opinions and value judgments. This process of renewed self-contemplation sets in motion the transcendence of conventional morality, unlocking the boundless potential for a revaluation of values. Embracing the task he bestowed upon himself, Nietzsche sought to prepare humanity for the advent of this transformative epoch, which he referred to as humanity's great noon. My task, preparing for humanity's moment of highest self-examination, a great noon when it will look back and look out, when it will escape from the domination of chance and priests, and for the first time pose the question, why? The question, what for? As a whole. This task follows necessarily from the insight that humanity has not put itself on the correct path, that it has absolutely no divine governance, that instead, the instinct of negation, of corruption, the decadence instinct, has been seductively at work, and precisely under humanity's holiest value concepts. The question of the origin of moral values is a question of the first rank for me, because it determines the future of humanity. In our quest for self-knowledge and the creation of new values that are our own, Nietzsche makes a curious demand. We must become physicists in order to become creators of value. We, however, want to become who we are, human beings who are new, unique, incomparable, who give themselves laws, who create themselves. To that end, we must become the best learners and discoverers of everything lawful and necessary in the world. We must become physicists in order to be creators in this sense, while hitherto all valuations and ideals have been built on ignorance of physics or in contradiction to it. So, long live physics, and even more, long live what compels us to it, our honesty. When Nietzsche calls for us to become physicists to be creators of value, he is referring to the Greek concept of physis, which means the study of nature. By transcending moral frameworks, we can engage in a self-exploration free from biases. This exploration involves delving into psychology, physiology, genealogy, and physics, offering different perspectives of knowledge. Nietzsche's goal is to reconnect humanity with nature, expanding physics as the study of nature, to encompass the study of human beings as part of the natural world. In this context, physics signifies a rejection of metaphysical ideas such as cause, force, and purpose. Instead of causality, Nietzsche introduces the concept of necessity, which entails discovering the natural laws and underlying patterns in the world. Embracing necessity reflects Nietzsche's affirmation of the world's interconnectedness. It challenges the belief in absolute separations and raises the intriguing possibility that our concepts of goals, purposes, and ends may be human constructs within a realm governed by chance and necessity. Thus, the study of nature is a necessary prerequisite for the creation of the self. To translate humanity back into nature, to gain control of the many vain and fanciful interpretations and accidental meanings that have been scribbled and drawn over that eternal basic text of Homo Natura, natural man, so far, to make sure that, from now on, the human being will stand before the human being, just as he already stands before the rest of nature today, with courageous Oedipus eyes and sealed-up Odysseus ears, deaf to the lures of the old metaphysical bird-catchers who have been whistling to him for far too long. You are more. You are higher. You have a different origin. Science and morality have played complementary roles in the quest for understanding and bringing order to the world. Science has sought to unravel the complexities of the external world by proposing hypotheses and theories to explain natural phenomena. On the other hand, morality has focused on exploring the inner world of human beings, attempting to provide guidance and familiarize us with our own nature. Both endeavors have been driven by the human intellect's inherent aversion to chaos and the desire for clarity and meaning. With the dissolution of moral frameworks, human beings are once again confronted with their own unfamiliarity, making Socrates' famous declaration relevant once again. We have become again completely obscure to ourselves. I know that I know nothing about myself. Nietzsche says that self-knowledge poses a significant risk for those who aspire to truly become themselves. If we have a conception of ourselves that restricts our efforts of self-transformation, then we will not be able to overcome ourselves. As human beings, we tend to cling to familiar notions, making it challenging to perceive things from a fresh perspective. Nietzsche meant to destroy our existing self-conceptions, making us strangers to ourselves once more, setting the stage for an authentic exploration of self-knowledge, devoid of preconceived notions. According to Nietzsche, genuine self-creation requires delving into the unconscious inner workings of our instincts and drives. Acquiring knowledge about our human nature, particularly the intricate processes occurring within us, becomes essential in the quest to become what you are. Thus, self-knowledge is a necessary prerequisite to self-determination. Armed with a better knowledge of ourselves, we can start to liberate ourselves from the confines of societal expectations and pre-established moral frameworks. Additionally, through the indirect approach of our exploration of history, we can shed light on our authentic desires, values, and aspirations.